today our special guest is Jinwon Lee from Korea University from South Korea, and she's a professor in human rights and globalization issues. So welcome to our program.
Welcome. Maybe
So,
I will start, from the question, about, we are wonderful about so-called Korean cultural wave. Sometimes we are calling it as a cultural revolution, but I'm not sure that it's right. Originally, we call it as a Korean wave. And that is very wonderful about key dramas, Korean dramas, Korean pop music, and pop music idols as well, very special. There are as well a lot of related challenges. Many of countries would like to continue or to copy success of Korean, and as well
Sure. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm very happy to be here. It's my first time to Lithuania, and I've only been here for the past 3 days, and I'm only here for 1 week, so I haven't met many people. I'm not really sure the listeners of this podcast how much they know about Korea or the Korean culture and so on. So, like
not much, not much.
Not much, I guess so. Okay. So so the Korean wave that you just have mentioned, in Korean we call it Hanryu, and it's in Chinese term, and basically Han means Korean and Ryu means wave. So we don't really call it Korean revolution. We don't really use the term revolution that much. We just call it literally it's Korean wave. So it's collective term used to refer to the phenomenal growth of Korean culture and popular culture, encompassing everything from music, like you've mentioned, so music, movies, dramas, online computer games, even the Korean food, Korean cuisine, just to name a few. Korean wave refers to the global popularity of South Korea's cultural economy, exporting pop culture, entertainment, music, TV, dramas, and movies, and so on. And it's a very great source of soft power, like Professor Joseph Nye from the Harvard University has mentioned. It's one of the ways that we influence the other people to like us. So now, like you all know, since early 2000, our culture has influenced, especially to the young people. They all listen to Korean music. A lot of them actually watch on Netflix. I'm not sure if you've seen
we know it.
Okay. Have you seen the Squid Game?
Yes,
Yeah,
of course.
of course,
Very
of
popular
course.
in
Thank you.
Lithuania was as well very
Oh,
popular.
really? Good.
And and Parasite and Squid Game, two of them.
Okay. So these things, so I'd like to mention why it's become so popular. And to understand this soft power of Korean culture, it's really important that we understand the mood we have, and also why it came that way, starting from the Korean history. So a lot of you, and especially listeners, would know that Hallyu, Korean wave, is what we call is a blessing to the development of Korean development and Korea's economy, to the business, like the academic exchange, like how I'm here in Lithuania. That's what soft power too. And so since early 1990s or even to 2000, Hallyu, the Korean wave, has become one of the biggest cultural phenomena in Asia. In the past 2 decades, South Korea's economy boosted very much. It has become rich and floristic. Right after the Korean War that ended in 1953, Korea's GDP per capita was lower than Haiti, Ethiopia, and even Yemen. So it was only around, it was less than $100. But now South Korea GDP per capita is above $40,000, and we are world's 10th largest economy. So we have made a very big growth in a very short span of time. So a lot of us, especially not my generation, but my parents' generation, remember had to go through when they were young. Right after the Korean War, they were very poor. We didn't really develop that much. And a lot of the lands were just farms, and in rural areas, there was a big gap between rich and the poor. In rural areas, urban areas, there's a big gap. And to overcome all of this, in the 70s in Korea, the President Park at the time came up with the idea of what we call as 새마을 운동, and that basically means new village movement. So the central government kind of pushed people to have the themes of ideas of self-help, collaboration, and diligence. So we have to come together, we have to collaborate and be diligent to develop. And that will lead to the less in poverty, and also improve the living conditions and so on. So what government did at the time was provide cement so they can build houses, build new roads, highways, especially build.
I'm sorry, but technological innovation,
Yes.
Samsung, Hyundai,
Yes, yes.
when you have a competition, technological competition in Japan,
Yes.
and you have China, which is copying everything,
Yes.
where did you find the ideas? Is it the government? Is it business people, entrepreneurship? To find global influence in the world of technology? Is it also copying, but in a more creative way? Or did you find your particular path in the world of technologies for your growth and success?
What happened was, so after this movement in 80s, we had what we call as chaebols, the conglomerates like Samsung, the leading phone makers, Hyundai and LG and so on. So they were like diversified family conglomerates who actually studied abroad, a lot of them, because they were very rich, and they run a family business. So they went abroad to learn all these new technologies, learn how to design, and learn from basically the Western concepts of how to prosper. And so they came back with, after they have learned the new ideas and adapted their new knowledge into the Korean modern technology. And the people, we call ourselves very, very diligent. And so we didn't really think of human rights at that time. I mean, to develop, working long hours without holidays, without break, was seen as something that we all had to do. To make this country to develop, we had to go through all these hard stages. So human rights were really wasn't even spoken at the time. So people's diligence and what we had learned from the Western countries and people coming back with their brain gain had actually made a big contribution to the Korean economy and us to develop further, definitely.
Yeah, but you see that many of countries stop on this technological level. They just develop some such kind of Samsungs, or some the other technique and technologies, but ordinary don't invest a lot into creative industries. And you got Korean got very big success in creative industries and income probably even bigger than Samsung. From film dramas and pop music, and in a way there should be some kind of government solution, this turning point, why to invest not into production of machines, but into production of styles, like idols. Maybe could you explain what for our audience what does mean this pop idols, Korean pop idols? Maybe not everybody knows about it.
Okay. So I have found a study done by the Korean Foundation that the direct impact of the Korean wave has actually doubled from 2016 to 2019. So within the 3 years short span, the direct impact of the Korean wave has dramatically increased, and that means we exported a lot of consumer goods and export of cultural content, like contents of movies, dramas, and so on. That has made a big impact on Korean economy. Why did the government, why did Korea decide to invest on these instead of other mechanics and those technology we used to do. Well, we still are investing a lot. Samsung, for example, they continue to produce cars and produce all these technological goods like TVs, phones, and all these machines. But we have suffered greatly during the recession, what we call as IMF period, because we had a great debt from the International Monetary Fund, and from that we suffered from a great recession that had a ripple effect from the neighboring countries to Korea, and we suffered badly from the recession, and what we did to recover, overcome of this problem was to all the citizens had to sell the gold they had in the homes. So that's that way that we actually paid the debt back to IMF. Anyway, so after the recession, the Korean economy's growth rate was really slow, and as far as I'm concerned, the growth rate of economy is less than 3%. It has been less than 3% in the past few years. So instead of that, people and because of the Korean government opening up our borders, we had a lot of exchange students. We had a lot of foreign workers coming into Korea who would be interested in our culture, and when they go back to their own countries, they could, let other people know what they have learned, the way we dress, the way we put on makeup, how the idols, dance, sing in front of the others. Those things were really new. So I'm born in the generation where I grew up listening to Western pop music, because K-pop wasn't even, it didn't even start at that time. I'm the person who grew up with listening to boy bands, mostly from the USA. And how are they different from? How is Korean pop bands different from them? Not very much. That's why it's called K-pop. It's Korean pop music. So it's pop music like them, but it's just Korean. A lot of young people really have this big fandom of these bands, and because let me link this back to the history. These boy bands, the lyrics that they sing brings the idea of hope. I'm sure you've all heard of BTS, which is one of the biggest world bands these days. The lyrics that they sing to, and it's interesting because they don't even sing in English. They sing mostly in Korean. Yes, and I guess the fans translate the lyrics. And the lyrics, if you have ever seen the lyrics translated into English, it's very hopeful. And they say, "I miss you," and that "miss you" doesn't mean I miss other girls, I miss other boys. It means it actually comes from the incident that had happened in Korea about 10 years ago, where the ferry actually sank. The ferry with a high school kids actually sank, and about 200 people died at that time. So it has all these lyrics have symbolics into it, and it's very hopeful. It says, you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to call me an idol. You don't have to call me something. I'm just an ordinary person. So it gives a linkage between it tells the people that I'm an ordinary person. I'm not somebody that you can just look up to. I'm a person, and I want to give you a big good influence, and that's why it's one of the reasons why people feel they're kind of connected and they feel closer to these pop bands.
Jinwon, please, but in any way, let's turn to this pop idols, but ordinary when we are looking for Western groups, we see the one style of dresses and makeup and design. And well, if we're looking to Korean pop music, we listen to very similar music, I would say. That's very European and American, jazz or rock music, which I listen as well, but in Korean language, but it's nothing very important. Many of countries thinks in native languages, but we see completely very special aesthetics, I would say, very special aesthetics. And these idols mean some convergence of many of styles and many of movements, which is very special from and different. And it may be more similar to, I would say, Japanese, some kind of, anima or manga, but it's different actually. But in any way, I think that is very artificial style, And this pop idol style became just not only the topic of admiration, but as well critique later. You know, could you explain about this pop style? Korea started to sell the style. What does it mean?
Sure. It means a lot to us because everybody wants to look like them, meaning that you have to be very skinny. It's very unnaturally skinny, and actually it has been an issue in Korea government because the young teenage girls actually want to look like these pop idols that they admire, which means they will go on a severe diet just to be as skinny as them. The clothes, they try to copy their makeup style, copy their clothes, and to look like them, you have to be super skinny. And or even the boys too. Even BTS and all these boy bands you see, they are very unnaturally skinny, and maybe they are born that way, but I guess they go on the serious strict diet. So you know, we have like the Korean government has actually been really you know, concerned about this the restrictions that the girls go through to become like them, and the schoolgirls who shouldn't be spending too much time looking, you know, trying to look pretty and so on. You know, they spend a lot of clothes and spend money on their clothes and makeup just to look like them, and it does really bring side effects too, because you know, a lot of girls actually have been, you know, suffering from the physical and also mental issues too, if you want to look like them. But you don't look like them because, you know, you're not like dressed by a professional, so you know. So this is one of the side effects. And also the boys too, if they want to look like one of the boy bands, they would go through the plastic surgeries. And even in Korea, in Seoul, we have an area, it's like in the city, right in the middle of the district called Gangnam, like size Gangnam style. There's a street with so many plastic surgeries, and it's like a street full of hospitals that only deals with plastic surgeries. And it just proves that there's so much demand for these plastic surgeries. And not only the Koreans, but we have people coming from Japan, China, Singapore, nearby countries to go through this plastic surgery because they think we are good at it. And it's nothing to be happy about, nothing to be proud of, that we are good at doing plastic surgeries. And
But Gangnam Style, he's quite plump.
yes, he is. He's plump.
Is he an exception?
Yes. He's a very exception. Nobody wants to look like him. We just like his style. But he's not like a very young boy group. So that's one of the things, you know, people would, I mean, going through a plastic surgery is a big stage, but people just do it without considering its danger behind. So that's one of the side effects from this.
And there, Jinwon, we could turn shortly to the human rights, you know, and
yes.
Because some companies of Korean are abused. Is okay that some companies abuse gender, you know, sexual, or they are accused into exploitation, you know, of these people, because in any way this makeup, what we're talking, this style of idols means some kind of manufacturing. Manufacturing, it's factory. It's not about you know, your existential choice, but in someone way following the, you know, mainstream, you know, of factories and so on. And from your own perspective as a, you know, human rights activist, you know, what kind of problems you see here in this area?
Definitely, because from as a feminist and as somebody who studies gender equality issues, I see a big problem with these girl groups, especially because the way they dress, they're only like middle school students. Some of them are only in early teens. They're very young, but they always wear something that make them look sexy, okay? And they even compete within themselves who is sexier. And the way they dress is one thing, but then again, this is a very good example to show you. We had an audition program, and it started from like 100 contestants, and every semester they had to like get rid of the contestants, and there will be, and at the end you'll be only left with like 10 people, and that will be like a band. And it was done. It started from boys groups, and the song, the logo song was 나야 나, means it's me. I'm the winner. I'm the winner, Diana. And the next year after, they did the same thing with the girls, 100 girls, and the logo song was Pick Me. So pick me. I mean, it's so different from it's me than pick me, you know. So I'm not like appealing myself. I have to be picked by others. So that was one big thing that it was stirred up the whole society about this sexuality and so on. So those things are definitely because boys don't have to dress sexy, you know, they have to show their macho, how macho they are, the strong image, maybe some cute, but they don't have to like reveal their skin or anything. But the girls, for sure, that's one of the issues that's been talked upon.
So the other issue of this cultural wave, Korean wave, means that you transform your culture into the weapon or instrument of soft power. And many of countries tried even to stem Korean activism, to stop, to stem, for example, in China and Japanese, you know, that all of countries consider it South Korea as a, you know, some kind of the growth of influence, I would say, in the area of soft power. What does it mean for Korean? Why Korean would like to dominate in this pop idol culture in all Pacific region, probably?
So we have started to export our Hallyu, the Korean wave, to Asian Pacific. Then now ASEAN region countries are actually importing our content. It means a lot to us because when BTS has given a speech at the UN level, and you know they visited President Biden a few days ago at the Washington, and every time we see that, we feel so proud and give us hope, thinking that we can do more than what we do now. And like I've said, we've had issues with the slow growth rate of economy, and now there's a foreseen, you know, predictors saying that we'll probably go through another recession in the near future. And so there's nothing, and because of pandemic, even, you know, people, there have been a lot of people who have suffered from, you know, income issues and so on. So this income disparity, social exclusion, and you know, social divide between the haves and have-nots. At the end, it gives us hope, making us feel that, you know, we can do better, and maybe in the future, you know, if they do well in other countries, that will bring us more like job opportunities for the young people, and you know, maybe those who work in music industries or movie industries, that will create more jobs. And for us, we can even go abroad to maybe work in this area. And we have a lot of people coming into Korea to learn the Korean language, and even in Lithuania, I hear that, you know, people learn Korean language. So in Korea University, where I come from, we have around 1,000 exchange students per semester from all over the world, and they come to take credits, but they also come just to learn the Korean language. And the number increases every year. So it means that, you know, they the brain gains to, you know, from the perspective of Korean people, and you know, so it will definitely boost up the economy. So it's really good.
But what is about North Korea? Because this Korean wave became so influential in all the Asia countries, including as well not only what you mentioned, but as well I know in such post-Soviet countries like Kazakhstan, that's as well quite popular. But in another way, you have the main neighbor, you know, North Korea, which looks completely different, you know. And as I understand, all your Korean wave is forbidden in North Korea, and all these styles are forbidden and is considered as a stupid capitalist bourgeois, style exploitation of people, and everything is wrong. So what is about cultural relationships with North Korea?
So that's a very interesting question. So it's our closest neighbor. Okay, we are the only country in the world now which is now divided. It's not permanent, but we're divided, and we've been divided for a long time now. And so they basically hate what we do, and they have actually made a criticism on the news. That the South people, meaning us, we are being stupid by like revealing our bodies and singing with guitars, and they just made fun of us. But one thing is that we South Koreans cannot travel to North Korea. We are banned from traveling, meaning that what we hear about them talking about us is only through the media. And all we know is what we hear from the news on TV and the newspapers. We do have some North Korean defectors in South Korea, and whenever somebody crosses over the border to live in South Korea, we help them. We very welcome them. So we hear from them about what's happening in North Korea, but as a citizen myself, I only get to hear through the media, which is probably true, but not 100%. So, but that, like you have said, they are not very fond of what we do. They make fun of us all the time. But then again, I didn't really hear this from the official source, like from somebody who's been like expertise in the field, only through from the newspapers or even the internet sites. So that's the only thing I can tell.
Could my question about North Korean as well? Could they watch some Korean dramas or some kind of films or music?
I hear that some of them can. Some of the high rank officials, definitely they can, and the high rank officials, they can even travel. They have even like their fancy homes abroad, and I know they can. And when you go near the border, if you turn on the radio, you can actually hear their radio channels, and they can hear ours. But we have the law. If we are caught listening to theirs, we'll be in serious trouble. It's a National Security Act. So we don't really try to do anything. And my generation, we don't feel as one country anymore. Like my parents' generation, my mom always says, "Oh, we have to be reunited. We are one country. We are only temporarily divided." But my generation and under, we feel that they're a total different country.
Yeah,
They're strangers.
do you see some kind of, in this sense, some possibilities, cultural, social, economical possibilities for some reunification? Like, could that is possible? How do you think?
Not in the near future. Maybe in the far future, but not in the near future. I don't see that coming. Definitely not.
Now that we're mentioning North Korea, and now that we Lithuanians are experiencing the danger of war coming from Russia, because Russia invaded Ukraine, started the war there, and we could be the next ones. I'm trying to look at the South Koreans with more understanding as you are being exposed to the nuclear dangers in North Korea. Now I'm more with empathy looking at Israel, which is like living every day next to a volcano. And this war in Ukraine helped me personally to be more in the sympathy with such countries. How do you in South Korea, from South Korean perspective, from this Eastern Asian perspective, see the war in Ukraine, the danger of Russia for Europe? Is it somehow really in the consciousness of South Koreans, or is it just Europe too far away?
To be very honest with you, we only hear, like, it's natural, but we only hear what's going on in the news, and it's just one of the very sad events that's happening. So we don't really, so to be very frank with you, we don't really know much about Lithuania. So some people, some scholars who've studied history, and the politicians, the political scholars, they know, obviously. But for ordinary people, it's just some of the events that's happening on the other side of the world. They don't see this event as a threat that could be same to us, like North Korea that could invade South Korea. So we don't really see the link in between. But definitely for as a South Korean, North Korea spends way more money on missiles, developing, these military tools and military, tanks and guns and so on. I know they spend way more than Korean government on the defense. So and we all hear that, if something happens between South and North Korea, we'll be in big trouble. That's why we keep on relying on the power of American soldiers to stay in South Korea to help us. But we don't really see it as a threat, what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, that links to our two divided nations.
Jinwon,
Yeah.
but look here, if we have started to speak of this comparative analysis of conflicts, that's in Lithuania quite popular, not only Lithuania, I would say even in the Baltic countries and Europe, to compare China-Taiwan conflict and that Russian-Ukrainian as two parallels. And China-Taiwan is not far away. Even if we're looking from our perspective of creative industries, one of major market is Taiwan as well, and Hong Kong and Taiwan. So Korea is very involved, South Korea is very involved into this Chinese affairs. And Odin, I am sure that you know about all the troubles between China and Taiwan. And probably your government is as well involved into solution of this global challenge. And but the first of all question, what's what the level of threat do you see between Taiwan and China, and the place of Korea in this conflict?
We are very close. We are close, but not close at the same time with China. And because of the trade war between America and China, it has greatly affected our economy. We used to have very many Chinese tourists coming into South Korea a few years ago. When we went out to these shopping districts, they were full of Chinese people. You could hear Chinese people speaking. But now when you go out, it's partly due to COVID-19, but we hardly see them anymore. And even like the Korean pop stars who used to like perform in China, now they're banned. So we are now in in a tension relationship. So hopefully with we have recently selected the new president. So with the new administration, things might change. We hope that things will get better in the future, but that's been happening on the Moon administration in the past few years. But the relationship between China and Taiwan, the Korean people don't really feel threatened, or it's more of China's relationship that we care about. It's not between them, that we don't really feel that their bad relationship will have a great effect on us. It's more of us with China, and China relationship with the US that will have a great effect on us.
May I ask you about now the relationship between Japan and South Korea, because of the traumatic history, all these traumatic memories like comfort women. Is it healing? Is Japanese government opening up for the all the wrongdoings? Is guilt in the consciousness of the Japanese society, like comparing with Nazi Germany, contemporary Germany is very much self-conscious and openly declaring its guilt for the Second World War II. What about Japanese, South Korean?
And your generation as well. Add your generation feelings as well.
Okay, so my generation feeling towards Japan is not as bad as my parents' generation, obviously. And the issue with comfort woman is very interesting because we have a statue in front of Japanese ministry in Korea, a statue of a girl that stands for a comfort woman. And every winter we try to like cover ourselves with like a scarf, and so we care about the issue. But what we hear on the news is that only the news, such as in Japan, is never sorry. They actually, some of them actually say, you know, these girls actually participate in the war voluntarily. They were not forced to do anything. Some people say they are prostitutes because they were paid. And we have some survivors living in Korea from as a comfort woman, and now a lot of them have died because they're old. And now we have less than about 10 living, and we have their voices. They are living survivors of this event, but Japan has actually never officially said sorry. They have never officially apologized about this event. And recently I saw the YouTube clip, and also it was on the Korean news, that this so it was like extreme part of the government actually made fun of this comfort woman image, and they actually made up a balloon that symbolizes this comfort woman. They were mimicking, they were just making laughs about it, and these girls are, you know, just prostitutes, they're nothing. But we, you know, we have never had an official apology from the government, and we are still very angry about the issue. And so every time there's like a football match or there's a sports game between Korea and Japan, we are so eager to cheer because we have to win. But my parents' generation, obviously, they went through this, so they are very angry about what's happened. But my generation, you know, we grew up listening to their music, reading their mangas. So we actually like their culture, and now we feel it's wrong, but it's in the past. We have to move on, and, you know, we have to get on well together for a better future. But still things, you know, these political issues and, you know, this tension between us still remains, I guess.
However, Japanese became one of the main competitor in the pop culture on this Korean wave. And even you mentioned manga readings and anime style, you know, as well. We compare with pop idols of Koreans. Now, but in a way, as I read the Japanese stems Korean wave and Korean activity in Japanese, and there is some kind of pop cultural conflicts, probably, or creative industries conflicts, competition, and so you are not completely friendly even in this area. Could you tell us about this competition between South Korea and Japanese in cultural area?
So we are competing because we all want to export our culture to another countries, have influence over them. But recently it has gone better because the main labels we have for creating pop groups, like we have SM, JYP, and so on, they have actually created their company in Japan too. So they have like SM Japan, JYP Japan, and so on. So they actually collaborate between, you know, Korean young people and Japanese young people, and maybe form a band together and so on. So we know that this cannot last forever. So you know, to make it lasting longer, this with a you know, Korean wave, we sometimes collect Japanese wave too. You know, they have influence too, because they have a longer history of their music influencing other cultures too. And so I think for the better future, the good things we need to, you know, absorb and learn. The bad side effects, we have to try to get rid of them. But why not? Why not? You know, we're living in this era of globalization. We have to collaborate. So for the better future, I think that's the way to overcome.
So both countries understand quite well what does mean soft power. and would like to use the so-called cultural politics and cultural diplomacy as some kind. What do you say about how conscious is cultural diplomacy of Korean?
How? Sorry, what was the word again?
How conscious is how consciously you are doing?
We are actually doing very much to
Now, about cultural diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy.
okay, cultural diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy. How it started. It definitely started from how BTS started to be on a level that nobody could do at the before. Like you're talking with the president, making a speech at the UN level, making amicable, friendly relations, and people actually looking up to them and saying, oh, if the Korean pop, I mean, some people make fun of it. Some people say, why invite Korean pop bands to the Washington, D.C.? But, it's a way of creating an amicable relationship between countries. We can actually use this cultural relations to lessen our tensions, and maybe for the future making stronger ties between the two. So I think this is one of the best ways. We cannot really say anything to the young boys who are invited to perform, and everybody loves music, everybody loves cultural issues. So cultural diplomacy is one of the best ways to lessen the tensions, I guess.
Yeah, I think that cultural diplomacy and competition through branding and brandings, that's much more better than military wars.
Yeah.
And I just, when you tell us, I just try to imagine what kind of brands Russia could propose for the world, which they will be accepted as very popular now, and to occupy the world through cultural brands. This is much more better than through militaries. And after, Russian occupation of some territories, which we see just the disease, but it's not about cultural brands and not about technologies. This is wonderful that, South Korea and Japanese choose so technological branding and creative way of competition in the global market. And I think it's a very good example for Baltic countries as well. However, Russian doesn't think so. They consider everything in very, I would say, flash and machine guns way.
Now they have the Z letter they exporting.
It's as well very stupid sign you see even from branding point of view. It's nothing interesting from aesthetical point. It's very banal, I would say. Sign. So, Tomas?
Yes. For the end of our program, I would like to ask one perhaps less sophisticated question. We have in various countries certain tendencies where people love to go for holidays. Russians love to go to Turkey, but the rich Russians, they love to go to French Riviera. Lithuanians love to go for holidays to Spain, certain islands in Spain. Where do South Koreans love to go for holidays?
I would say number one is Hawaii. Because you can enjoy the beach and do shopping at the same time. So my friends with young kids, our first number one destination would be Hawaii.
Why did you did you come to Lithuania? What's the purpose was for your so long traveling?
It was very long, one of the longest, because there's no direct flight from Seoul to Vilnius. I've been to Europe many times. I've lived in different countries in Europe, but never been to eastern side or the northern part. So it was something new. I had a choice between different countries in Europe, but I just wanted to explore the Baltic countries, and especially I knew that you've accepted many the refugees, especially. And as somebody who studies human rights, Korea has a very low acceptance rate of refugees, and we feel feel really shameful about this issue, and I wanted to learn like what strategies you have and why you are so open to these people, and you give them like free housing and free education to all these Ukrainian refugees especially. So I wanted to see with my eyes and learn good things from you.
Yeah, it's because we feel that Ukrainians are defending not only their freedom, but also our freedom. So we feel interconnected also historically because of Lithuanian Grand Duchy. Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine, we used to be one state.
Yeah, a few hundred years ago.
Yeah, so thank you, Professor Lee,
Thank you so much.
talking to us. And our viewers, we had Professor Lee from Korea University, from South Korea, and it was me, Tomas Kavaliauskas, and Professor Gintautas Mažeikis. Thank you for being with us.